Let me first of all congratulate the convener of this conference, three-day conference, Mr. Abhinav Pandya, who is the CEO of Usanas. I think he has shown exemplary leadership in undertaking this initiative, organizing the conference here last year and again this year in the beautiful city of Udaipur. I think he needs particularly congratulations and felicitations because he's really brought all of us out from the corridors of Delhi. That is where normally all the think tanks are located, where discussions take place. But getting us to this very important place of it has been known for its, as we've heard in the afternoon today, for its power, influence, courage and valor for many centuries. The subject that we are going to be discussing today is developing India's geopolitics and security roadmap in the changing world order. And I have a stellar panel of 6 speakers. We have about 1 hour or so, so I think about 7-8 minutes for each of the speakers. If you could focus on that. I think we would also like to have some questions from the floor if possible, if time permits. I don't know what the organizers have in mind. What is shown on the sheet here is about 1 hour, but let us see if we can, if we don't finish in 1 hour, maybe we can take a while longer. So I think we also, just to give a brief background, it is, the subject of course is extremely significant because it forces us, as we've been discussing earlier in the afternoon also, as to how the country should respond to the challenges of both geopolitics and security in these very uncertain and volatile times. Two aspects, of course, that have been mentioned earlier also have defined the last few years and will continue to hang over developments in the coming year. The first one, of course, is the what is known as the black swan event of once-in-a-century COVID-19 pandemic. And the second, what could be termed as a grey rhino event, the Russia-Ukraine conflict. This is, of course, not to lessen the importance of a large number of other existing challenges like the existential threat of climate change, the state-sponsored and non-state actor-driven terrorism, regression in achieving the sustainable development goals, and many more. Let me at the outset flag, in a couple of minutes, some of the huge challenges and opportunities, and possibly also raise a few questions which our distinguished panelists could possibly try and respond in their statements. So one of the most formidable security challenges for India is the presence of the rise of China, the very remarkable rise of China over the last few decades. India would, of course, like to have cordial, friendly relations based on equality and respect, what have been termed as the three mutuals by our External Affairs Minister. But it has become increasingly clear that China would like to see a subservient India. China says that it wants a multipolar world, but is really keen to create a unipolar Asia. Secondly, the US over the last 2 decades and more has emerged as the most consequential and significant partner for India in economic, security, political, strategic, education, technology and many other fields, both in values and in interests. Relations between the two countries have continued to grow irrespective of which party has been in power in either the United States or in India. There is bipartisan support in both countries for a stronger relationship between our two countries. In 2016, I'm sure our audience would remember that, recall that PM Modi, while he was speaking He was addressing the joint session of the QS Congress. He had said that India has overcome the hesitations of history. And last year when he was speaking to President Biden in Tokyo on the sidelines of the Quad Summit in May, he had said, he had marked that this is a partnership of trust. So another aspect that I could possibly flag is, and that has been mentioned earlier in the afternoon by our chief guest of the day today, is the significant visit of the Chinese president to Moscow earlier this week. It would be useful to discuss the increasing bonhomie and the growing dependence of Russia on China, both for export of its fossil fuels and economic collaboration, as well as for diplomatic, political, and possibly even military support, and the impact it would have on the world and on India. Also, what would this mean in terms of China's plans to take over Taiwan in the coming years? China has grown remarkably in recent decades in economic, political, and military terms. Now it has started making forays also in global diplomacy by engineering the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It is understood that China is planning to organize a meeting between Iran and the 6 members of the GCC later this year. It wants to emerge as a peacemaker and mediator, and has floated its 12-point peace plan for resolving the Ukraine conflict. While this has been rejected by the West, it has been welcomed by President Putin during President Xi's visit to Russia. So friends, in addition to the above, China has recently also launched several new strategies like the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, and the Global Civilizational Initiative. So it is in these challenging times that India has emerged as the 5th largest economy in the world. It is slated to become the 3rd largest economy going forward a few years later. It is the fastest growing economy. It has been identified as a ray of hope in an otherwise dark and gloomy world by the Managing Director of IMF. India has also organized under its G20 presidency the Voice of Global South Summit. It is also the president of the SCO this year, and it is under these circumstances that we find India trying to confront the various challenges both on the domestic front as well as on the economic front externally also. So these are all the issues I think our panelists are going to share their views and their ideas. As I said, since time is limited, about 7 to 8 minutes. Let me first start with Captain Alok Bansal, and you could speak on any aspect of the particular subject that we are discussing.
Thank you, sir. I think the subject is developing India's geopolitics and security roadmap in the changing world order. Well, we have been hearing about the changing world order, right, I think from the start of this conference. And since there are a lot of students, faculties from educational institutions, I would just like to say, in social sciences, there are no perfect answers. So since morning we have been hearing, so-and-so is friend, so-and-so is enemy, the nations have permanent interests. Not to my mind. There was a time when the United States has its interest in Middle East because energy was essential. The US doesn't need energy anymore. Its energy is self-sufficient, so interests have changed. Today, there was a time when nickel cadmium was very important. Today, lithium is important. Tomorrow, something else may be important. So nations' interests also change. Nothing is sacrosanct. Believe you me, go back into history, you will see nations change. Alliances, they are not even worth the paper on which they are signed actually. Somebody talked about Triple Entente before First World War. Italy was a member of the Triple Alliance with Germany and Austria. But when the war started, it joined on the other side. So what's the use of those alliances which only tie you down, which actually tie you down to certain policies, certain things? Well, India has global power aspirations. We want to become a big power, but we don't want to take big power challenges. We don't want to shoulder the responsibilities that come out with big power. Saudi Arabia, Iran, detente is organized by Xi Jinping. Why not India? We were ideally suited to do that. Now he is in Moscow. We could have also done that. Risk-averse conservative diplomacy may be good. It's good, safe. But if you want to become a global power, you have to strike out. You have to move out of your comfort zones. Try something which has not been done. And the world order is changing. Now, is the world order changing? Somebody said, is the world order changing? Yes. There are so many changes which are happening. And that's why I said there can be no permanent friends, foes or something. Somebody said so and so is an enemy. Please go back 2,500 years of recorded Indian history. From Bimbisar, when the recorded history starts, to this date. Which country has attacked which country how many times? How many Western powers have come and invaded us? How many Central Asian states have come and invaded us? How many West Asian states? And how many times has China come and invaded? Look at it. We must be realistic. There are no permanent foes or friends. And I'm not trying to say China is a friend, or Pakistan is a friend, or Pakistan is an enemy. But please understand, Pakistan, somebody said Pakistan is passe, we only need to look up China. In Eurasian heartland. So we have to think about it, what we need to do. Second difference, which of course is Afghanistan. I think the Western world talks about Russia-Ukraine war, they don't talk about what happened in Afghanistan. The manner in which Kabul fell actually should have sent reverberations all across the globe. Of course, now we are teaching Taliban and I am Kozhikode some management lessons. I don't know what management lessons will they learn who don't believe in gender equality, ethnic equality or religious equality. Can you really transform them? A lot of people are very happy that Taliban are having problems with Pakistan, so it suits us. But does it really suit us in the long term? See, the problem is most of the security analysts and so-called IR specialists have never read Islamic theology. We need to understand theology to understand jihad. Jihad has certain theological prerequisites. And one of them is you need to capture territory. The Prophet did not fight in Makkah when people opposed him. He migrated to Medina. But when he had Medina under him, he recaptured Makkah. So for theologically a jihad to be legitimate, you need to have certain territory under your control. And now Amirul Mu'minin controls a territory. Al-Qaeda never said that they wanted to wage a jihad under Osama bin Laden or Ayman al-Zawahiri. They always wanted to wage a jihad under Amirul Mu'minin, who was Mullah Omar then and now Mullah Akhundzada. The Taliban's capture of power in Afghanistan threatens India in 4 ways. Firstly, any ragtag militia feels if a ragtag militia like Taliban can defeat the United States, why can't we defeat the Indian army or the Indian security agencies? It's actually bolstered. I'm not talking about India, it happens anywhere else. The second factor is, as I said, it provides theological validation of jihad. Now there is a territory under Amirul Mu'minin, so jihad gets validated. Of course, paucity of time, so I won't go deeper into theology, but we can discuss Islamic theology. The third factor is, we need to understand what is the end objective of Taliban. Establishment of a global Islamic emirate. It's not going to remain confined within the geographical frontiers of Afghanistan, irrespective of what Taliban might have said in Doha. Because whatever Taliban said in Doha, they have already violated it. If you go back into the history of last 1 year, everything that they said, that we will do this, they have violated it. So, if global Islamic emirate has to be established, it has to spread. It's an ideological state, it's not a territorial state. And that ideological state will expand. And fourth, God forbids, peace descends in Afghanistan, as the West is hoping will. Then what happens? The foot soldiers of Taliban, who have been only firing guns for last 2 decades, will not start plowing the land. They will just move to new war fields. And they could be within your territory, well in your neighborhood, anywhere. So we need to be very careful. This is going to have a difference. Of course, now you have Saudi Arabia, Iran, detente, which I said, We should have been in the forefront. If at all that detente had to take place, we should have been there. We are not there, somebody else has done it. It's gone to Moscow. If there was actually a free and fair one, he would have probably got a Nobel Peace Prize. But the fact is, it has created a turbulence. There is a detente between Iran and Saudi Arabia. You see Bashar al-Assad traveling to UAE. Obviously, UAE needs different partners. Of course, we have, somebody said earlier, minor differences which can be done. So, how we have to actually do that? 1 minute. So, we need to move on. And as I said, diplomacy is the art of possibilities. You can't have a diplomacy which is cast in stone. Somebody said, we will not talk to Pakistan. Why are we talking? Then what is the diplomacy? If you have already cast in Hammurabi's code of conduct on a rock edit, then you don't need diplomats. That's a given. Then you follow it. The diplomacy is art. You have to change. Sometimes you have to talk, sometimes you do not have to talk. Eventually, if India has to grow, you have to have your neighborhood with you. You have to get your neighborhood. And as I said, Pakistan, which is a byproduct of two-nation theory, poses an existential ideological threat to a secular India. Remember that. And vice versa. If secular India thrives, the people are bound to ask the question, why Pakistan? So you have to get your neighborhood first and then move forward. Indian Ocean, yes, we are moving forward. We are doing a lot. China definitely is a challenge, what it is doing. But remember, when two men are walking towards each other with hands in pocket, each is thinking the other one is carrying a gun in his pocket. We need to realistically look at the dispute with China. And I'm not trying to say that they are right. Our claims on boundary are very, very strong. But it is a dispute. Somebody said we were taking taxes from Kailash and Mansarovar till 56, 57. It's not true, sir. We had an enclave called Minsar, which used to maintain and which we had for 600 years. We had till 600 years, till 1950 is the last reported report from Iqbal Kalo, who was the Jammu Kashmir state officer, who went to Minsar, collected taxes and sent a report to India. Pandit Nehru's directions to the negotiator was that if they insist on Minsar, we have no grounds to hold on. But if they don't discuss it, don't discuss this. They did not discuss it, we did not so. So on paper, Minsar still belongs to you. You can still claim it. The government of India did not claim it. That's a different issue. As far as our territorial disputes are concerned, they are all colonial constructs. The Britishers were so upset about having a common borders with Russia, Imperial Russia initially, and colonial Soviet Union subsequently, that they wanted China to come and occupy the territory between Russia and India. There are so many letters. You go and see the archives. The archives are full. The British authorities have written to Tang Emperor, please come and occupy the territory. Please come and occupy the territory. When Kashgaria rose, the China retreated. But when again Kashgaria fell, the China again came in. The whole Takdumbash Pamir was occupied by China because Britishers kept asking them, please come and occupy, please come and occupy, please come and occupy. And same is the case as far as Xinjiang and of course your Aksai-Chin and areas are concerned. The lines which were constructed, Johnson Line, Johnson-Ardag, MacDonald-McCartney lines were all British constructs. So your borders are colonial constructs and the problems are also colonial constructs. You have to get over that, get the neighborhood together and then you can move forward. Today, India and US are moving forward. They are good allies. And it's not because of common interest. It's because of common values. Those values have not changed. The values of democracy and pluralism which held us in good steam, even when we were in the opposite camp during Cold War. Even during the Cold War, IMF support and the US aid that came to India was phenomenally high for a country which was perceived by US to be in the Soviet camp. So that was driven by the common values. So ultimately, with those words, I think I'll take leave before Ambassador Sajjanhar actually nudges me to come out.
Pandya for inviting me here today in this beautiful city of Udaipur. I am very delighted to be here and speak on a topic which is, I think, is very relevant to all of us. I was handling counter-terrorism before I took over this division recently. So Abhinav asked me to speak on our counterterrorism efforts diplomatically, which we have been doing over the years. I would focus primarily on that and will try to link with what we have been doing so far and how it is important in the changing world order. Terrorism, as you all know, continues to be a problem. We have been facing it for years together from our western neighbor primarily. We have terror organizations like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Al-Badr. They are there for years together, have been trying to create problems in a country. This is all well known. How do we actually come over it? These are the issues which I think we need to discuss. There are certain challenges before us and we need to focus on it. The first challenge is how do you make such countries responsible and accountable for what they do, who supports terrorism, where the terrorism is planned and perpetrated, in our case, from across the borders. So I think it's high time that the world thinks about it. There has been efforts in this direction. There are organizations like the Financial Action Task Force, which has got some real teeth with it. We have seen that they have the powers, they do actually grey-list and blacklist countries, but is that enough? I think that's a beginning and we need to look beyond that. We need to find out whether there can be a continuous process where such countries are held accountable years after years till they actually stop doing all these things. There are certain ways to do it, but you have seen that Pakistan has been in the grey list for years, in the last couple of years, and we have seen them given action plan that they have to comply with. There was 28-point action plan which was given to them in 2018, and again in 2021 they were given 7-point action plan. They complied on papers some of these issues, and as a result we have seen that some of the terror activities have come down. But then after they got out of the grey list, we have seen that there are again some of the challenges which we are facing. There are reports of building up of again terror infrastructure across the borders. So I think that's something which we really need to look into as we go in the future, and how we make the international community and international institutions more responsive to the threats of terrorism. And I think the world needs to look at it. The UN needs to look at it very carefully and to find really the solutions. And in fact, one of the way forward was provided by our External Affairs Minister when he pronounced the 8-point action plan for the UN member states to follow. And I think that could be the one of the roadmap which we can. Another challenge in terms of countering terrorism, I think, is the use of UN emerging technologies. UN emerging technologies are very important for development, for other aspects, but at the same time there are chances of UN emerging technologies getting utilized and misused by these terror groups. We have seen how drones are being now used to carry arms, ammunition, drugs, and so on from across the border. In the last couple of years, we've seen that there are more than, in fact, in the last year alone, there were more than 250 terror kind of incidents which were perpetrated through drones. So I think that is something which we really need to look at. It's very difficult to identify drones because they fly very low and it's very difficult to catch them in the radar. So I think that's something which we really need to focus on as we go forward. Another, financing textbook drug trafficking. I think that is something also very, very important, that how do we look at this. And as you have seen that a lot of drugs productions which takes place across the border are utilized for generating funds for financing of terrorism. There have been traditional and non-traditional way of financing terrorism. New methods of financing of terrorism like crowdfunding, etc. is taking place. I think we need to look at all these issues also and to come out with a roadmap to deal with these issues. What we have been doing diplomatically on these efforts, some of these efforts which we have talked about on bilateral front, we have been active with a lot of countries. We have almost 30 bilateral joint working groups with different countries on counterterrorism issues, where all these issues are discussed on a regular basis. We have tried to convince and to convey to these countries our assessment of the things, and to an extent I can say that we have been successful in conveying our concerns on these issues to all these countries. We are also a founding member of the Global Counterterrorism Forum, where there are about 30 countries who are members of it, and they work in laying down the normative framework, and we have been doing that. Of course, one of the aspects which we are still struggling to get through is the comprehensive convention on counterterrorism, and that is because of the differences in defining the terrorism itself. And I think that's the fundamental problem which we really need to find solution to. But given the political dimensions, it's very difficult to find a solution to it. But we are continuing with our efforts if we can get through it someday. And I think my time is over. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Mahaveer, if you could just stay there for a minute. So I have a couple of questions, and if there are any questions from the floor, maybe we can quickly take before you leave. One, you mentioned about the CCIT.
Yes.
Can we say that we have given it up for good? Because now it's been, 1996, 97 that we first piloted it. So it's now more than 24, 25 years or something.
I won't say that, sir, we have given it up. If you see the joint statement which are coming out, we do mention it. We do
not as enthusiastically as we used to do earlier.
Going on in the UN also, in the Sixth Committee also about this issue. But as of now, that you know that there hasn't been any consensus on certain aspects of it, which I think we need to really look at it, how we can actually form a consensus. There are talks going on this issue, but there are many countries who have actually given it up. So that's also
Anything on fake news, meaning, because that also leads to so many terrorists.
That's the new and emerging technologies. I think even the fake news also, for example, can be countered with the help of AI. We can detect it. How do we use it? That's something which we need to look into. We are still in an evolving phase, so something we really need to focus more on this. As I said, I just joined this new and emerging technology division, which includes work on AI, even semiconductors.
So maybe when you participate next year, then you'll have a much stronger response.
That aspect also we really need to think about that. Going forward, these will have a lot of geopolitical and security issues also. These new and emerging technologies. So
yes, sir.
Those who would command and control these new and emerging technologies will have a lot of control on geopolitical and security issues. Thank you, sir.
Are they telling you that they are taking specific steps to get out of the brainwashing of people, which is being done by a lot of religious leaders? Brainwashing. Engage these so-called religious leaders who are actually, in a sense, conspiring or going along with radicalization in terms of messaging. Jihad is supposed to be a struggle against your own weaknesses, which are taking you away from the divine. But no, jihad has to be made with a sword. Rubbish. Then, counter-terror, are they telling you, yes, we have called those religious leaders and we are telling them?
Which we follow, the methodologies which we employ in different countries.
All when you have a number of batsmen who play better than you. But I engage the audience. I will give you two words. One is uncertainty and the second is brinkmanship. These two words have a self-identity, but these are very dangerous. Because brinkmanship and uncertainty leads to cascading effects and might be disasters. We are seeing this return of Cold War 2.0, but the template has changed where China is the senior partner and Russia is the junior partner. And there is a lack of serious and honest brokering. Nobody wants to get in. I'm contextualizing it because of the fact that arms lobby always every decade wants a big war. Because if there is no war, they cannot sell anything. So therefore this technology is critical. The other aspect I want to highlight, when the 5 UN Security Council members are involved in one war, who is going to make peace? Another, there is a greater aspire for superlative syndrome. What do I mean by superlative syndrome? Is greater Iran, greater Turkey, and now greater NATO. This greater word itself is creating a lot of challenges and a lot of concerns across spectrum. Also, I want to really highlight it, that Europe should shed this imperialist past where they want to dictate terms to the larger global order, which is just not done. Because now the shift is from Euro-Atlantic to more Asia-Pacific, you can call it Indo-Pacific. Now, critical in place for India is more with regard to, if you look into the Indian strategic thought, is about dharma, is about morality, is about balance. I don't want to listen to only Europe, I want to listen to Russia also. But is the conditions good enough to bring Russia and Ukraine together? No. There is increasingly sabotage, even G20 you can see it easily. So where exactly are we meeting that point? The new normal, again, is uncertain. And the problem is the override of brinkmanship is which we have to cater to. Now when you look into larger, I teach, national security strategies. If you take the national security strategies of US over the period from Obama and all others, they need to create an enemy to survive. And this enemy, even if Russia is disintegrated, China is disintegrated, I won't be surprised that US will name us as one of the enemies. Because again, US needs an enemy. Other aspect is that if you look into Russia's security culture, it automatically says it's on a fault line of Asia and Europe. And it is always aspiring that it is vulnerable. It needs a buffer zone. There is a book, wonderful book, and nobody wants to read that, which is written by Isabel Facon, which says why there is a crisis between Russia and Ukraine. It completely simplifies it. It says why there are fault lines. Kindly go through it. Now, when you look into, is the larger security architecture good enough to protect future in terms of building bridges with regard to mediation, with regard to conciliation and all those things? Look into India's profile 60s and 70s. We were everywhere. We were seen as the honest broker. And I acknowledge, Captain Bansal also talked about it, whether we are ceding that territory to other players in the larger gamut of things. Now, the thing is that how we are really looking into this impact which is coming up because of multilaterals, agreements and all those things. The bigger aspect is that the fault lines between the new order dictated by the new Cold War 2.0 will bring about that fault line which might be till the Eurasian level, but now it will be marking it at the Middle East as well, where China will be seen as a more better, conciliator, mediator between different countries rather than US, because again, the cascading effect is US doesn't need energy to remain relevant in the larger West Asian theater. Now coming to the fact that how are we preparing, and this is the second part and I won't take 4 minutes. None in my career chairperson has given me a pink slip, so I maintain that order. So the other aspect is that in India, are we really prepared for it? You ask any rickshawala, he will have an opinion on Pakistan, but ask anybody, he doesn't have an opinion on China. When you look into larger national security conscience, it is built from history, geography, as well as the thinking of the ruling elites. They deal with that. Who decides what exactly is important for us? That national conscience is missing. Are we proud of our history? Do we take our children to the Maritime Museum? No. Why? Because it is always stated that we are the fearsome people who have lost a number of wars to the intruders. Have we worked on how to work on future space strategy? I rest my case. Thank you very much.
Well, I was almost left speechless. I would say that when we accuse ourselves of not having strategies in various issues, we should, something that the NSA once told me was that if you don't know something, doesn't mean that it is not happening. Let me assure you that on many of the issues that are being called out, there is something happening. Now everything cannot come into a public domain because of certain reasons. I agree that people have a right to know, but there will be a time when they should know. I think a lot of the issues that got highlighted was actually about the new spaces where we need to have a diplomatic initiative. Like space is one of them, the sea is one of them, the ACs. Cyber, yes, but the most important part is the mind. The battle that is going to take place in the minds. Now, if we go back in time, and we talked about, this is a conversation that's been going on for the last 2 days, about India's great cultural heritage, civilizational stand. But how did we use that? starting from the time when Buddhism travelled from the south to Southeast Asia, or it travelled from to the China to the north. And they travelled to Afghanistan and then to Tibet and then on to China. These strains, the ideological strains that we spread, that was our basic influence. So while everybody else was later on trying to colonize the world by using physical power to gain economically, we were actually spreading a better message. The Indo-Pacific, what was it about? India was the fulcrum to influence everything that took place from the south, Cape of Good Horn to Korea. And if you look at it, your entire cultural influence is in that arc. You were also the transit point from the transition of Islam to the east, of Christianity to the east, and it all happened because of trade. And the great influence that the empires like the Chola Empire had in that region, that basic reason hasn't gone away. Transformational technologies, but the transformation that is taking place in technology, primarily by the marriage of data, internet and communications. Here is where our strengths will lie, where we will need to leverage our position with the countries that are not empowered. There was a very strong debate at the time when we had to convert to 5G. So, do we look at that? How do we sustain those smaller countries who will be looking at cheaper technologies, transformational technologies to sustain themselves, who will not fall prey to who you think are colonizers in a different kind of way? If you look at that, that may give us an opportunity of actually leading the world, and especially the more underprivileged world, and that could give India its position to become what was said as a global power. Thank you.
So you gave up your time.
Okay. Say brevity is the soul of it.
Yeah, but I don't know whether we are here for wit or more information. Okay.
Army man, I'll try and speak to the military or military related aspects. Allow me to start with what the Prime Minister, I'm going to say what Prime Minister said during his speech at the India Today's conclave very recently. And I'm not quoting him verbatim, but he said, the world is emerging from the shadow of COVID and facing the brunt of a war in Ukraine. Yet it is being, in this context, still it is being referred to as India's movement. And the next sentence is mine. Now that is saying a lot. He, in the same speech, he also went on to say, the world has realized that the Indian ideas and India's capabilities are for the global good. So, world order changing, we know that. I will just rattle out a few bullet points. First is the rise of China. Second is polarization that is being caused, rise of China and a stated aim to replace US as the #1 superpower. Second, polarization caused by during the Russia-Ukraine war, which has actually led to revival and enhancement of the NATO, the no-limits friendship between China and Russia, and the growing nexus between Russia, China and Iran. West is also now drawing a balance between the Eurasian imbroglio, that is under the war, and the Indo-Pacific dynamics. We all know what is happening in Ukraine, but India has taken a very principled stand, or shall we say, its principle being its national interest, has taken not an era of war, as Prime Minister said it, but the world still respects strength. And strength is no longer a merely military function. It is about economy, it is about diplomatic heft. And economy, I would say, is far more important, firstly because of the economic leverages. Somebody said earlier, economy, trade used to be soft power earlier, but today they are hard power. Also because we need economic might or economic capability to modernize our military. And diplomatic strength, I would say, flows from these two. So there are many other instruments of power, but these three are more important: economic, military and diplomatic. Having said this, Indian economy is growing in midst of a global slowdown. We are a 3 trillion economy, or more than 3 trillion economy, going on to be a 5 trillion economy soon. We are the 5th largest, going to be 3rd in a couple of years. Control. There were skirmishes, there were casualties on both sides, but we stood our ground. India is the only country which we refused to attend the BRI summit, I think it was in 2017, because we protested against their China-Pakistan economic corridor passing through the disputed territories. We have banned over 90 apps. So this is what India is doing in military terms. As far as groupings and alliances go, India is exercising strategic autonomy here as well. We are a valuable member of Quad on one hand, which is dubbed as the Asian NATO. But we are also an important member of the SCO, which China started originally as their answer to NATO, so to speak. We hold presidency of SCO today, just as we hold the presidency of G20, both simultaneously.
At the PP&R division MEA, creating or contributing to a roadmap in about 7 to 8 minutes was to begin with a difficult task. But with samosas and cakes floating around the line of sight, it just makes it a little more arduous and a more challenging task. I think the most important thing speaking about a roadmap is that at the outset, over the last 1.5 days, we've been hearing about how the world order is changing. I think the key question here is in terms of what is the world order going to become if it is changing. Because that is when we will be able to create that kind of an effective roadmap and position ourselves in such a manner in terms of what kind of effective role can we play if we are able to understand or interpret what kind of a world order is going to emerge. Is it going to be a unipolar world that's going to continue as a unipolar world? If the US power, comprehensive national power is on the decline, as many strategic analysts say, would China be able to, and of course China is filling in some of those vacuums, but would China be able to play an effective role in taking over, and would the unipolar world continue? Would it be a multipolar world? Yes, we see certain features of a multipolar world, but has it defined today to emerge as a multipolar world? I think that seems to be more of a possibility, but there is no definitive conclusion at that. What we do know at this moment is there are rapid developments that are taking place in the international environment. We've got pandemics, we've got disasters, we've got conflicts, and very clearly the world order that is changing at the moment is in a state of flux, and we don't have clarity in terms of what is going to be the definitive outcome. And we all know the casualty and the numbers. It was nothing less than what you would see in a physical war. So today national security has to encompass a comprehensive outlook, and not just only a whole of government approach, but also a whole of system approach to possibly become more inclusive. And that is where I think the strategic community can possibly come in and play that kind of a role by looking at the national, the larger, longer perspective. It's difficult for the larger strategic community to come out with very practical recommendations. They can also be involved in, as Foreign Minister Jaishankar recently briefed a group of international relations experts in Delhi. They can also be involved in planning for a global footprint as part of forward thinking. So not only are they looking at long term, but they can also be used in forward thinking. Security cannot be segregated from foreign policy. External policy cannot be segregated from domestic policy. So whatever roadmap we are talking about, it's got to be a single roadmap complementing each other. And hence, let me just put out some pillars of that, because I know, sir, I don't have a lot of time. One, of course, it's important in that roadmap for us to emerge as an influential global voice. But what our ability to balance our long deliberative approach, for example, the number of years it took for the formation of the National Security Council, or for that matter the CDS itself. I mean, these were proposals that emerged many years ago, should be complemented with the fact that if we are going to be an influential global voice, we will be called upon to make quick decisions. This could include issues related to environmental security, which is a very important agenda in the upcoming G20, terrorism, as well as management of critical resources. It is very important for us to be seen as a giver rather than a taker. And I think somebody spoke about the Operation Vaccine Maitri. So I don't need to talk much about it. I think that played a very effective role. Another important area as a global voice would be to create new institutions, and I think a beginning has already begun there with the International Solar Alliance. Another important initiative would be championing causes and practices. I think the fact that we've got the International Yoga Day, the International Year of Millets are all very important initiatives. Culture is another area that we must focus upon, and I finished, sir. I'm sorry, I'm finished. I think there are some initiatives that are being considered. For example, a grouping of Ramayana and Mahabharata nations is something that the government of India is considering. Annapurna certificates to many of the restaurants abroad who are serving Indian cuisine food. A conference on Indology studies that is abroad. I mean, these are some of the things that has been discussed. So, culture could be another very important pillar.
Very many different directions. So let me, and since we are, because of paucity of time, we cannot go to the audience for some questions or comments. Let me just make some very brief comments on some of the, as great expectations. As I mentioned in my comment, if the managing director of the IMF can say that India is the only bright spot in an otherwise gloomy environment. So, it does, and it's not only the IMF, it's also the World Bank, it's also the UNDP. All of them are making similar statements. So I think going forward, India definitely will be much more proactive in whatever the challenges are and whatever steps we need to take. And I think lastly also there were comments made about, why not come up with a national security strategy, cyber security. My own conversations with the people who deal with these things is that it's not, and I totally agree with you what you had said, Mr. Sahai, that a lot of work is being done, but that the government wants to provide itself that flexibility, that room for maneuver, that they can, if there are new changes, and particularly since things are changing at such a fast pace. And let me now pass on. We have finished with our discussion. Let me pass on the
It was really very thought-provoking and something very enlightening. We got to hear various diverse views on the national security and the future strategy. Indeed, it was a great learning experience for us. Now I invite Mr. Priyank Kanungu sir to deliver his special remarks on the use of NGO, its foreign funds and the national security issue.
बहुत धन्यवाद करना चाहता हूँ कि इस कॉन्फ्रेंस में फॉरेन फंडिंग और एनजीओस के थ्रू जिस तरीके की इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी को थ्रेट्स है उस पर बात करने के लिए आपने मौका दिया। भारत के गृह मंत्री ने पिछले पार्लियामेंट सेशन में पार्लियामेंट में कहा कि फॉरेन फंडिंग के थ्रू भारत की डेमोग्राफी को चेंज करने के प्रयास भारत में बर्दाश्त नहीं किए जाएंगे और इस कारण हम अपने, लेकिन ऐसा स्टेटमेंट पार्लियामेंट में क्यों भारत के ऑनरेबल होम मिनिस्टर को देना पड़ा? भारत की धरती गवाह है कि जब डेमोग्राफी चेंज होती है तो देश की ज्योग्राफी भी चेंज होती है। डेमोग्राफी चेंज होना इंसिस्ट करता है किसी भी इलाके की ज्योग्राफी को चेंज करने के लिए। जब हम फॉरेन फंडिंग से चलने वाले एनजीओज की एक्टिविटीज़ के बारे में बात करते हैं, मैं आपको 2-3 एग्जांपल्स केवल अपनी टाइम लिमिट के अंदर यहाँ पे बताना चाहता हूँ। आप लोग प्रबुद्ध लोग हैं देश के और आप लोग उस पर चर्चा करें, यही केवल एक उद्देश्य है। देश में सबसे ज़्यादा फॉरेन फंडिंग जो आती है उसमें एनजीओज को मिलने वाले पैसे का एक बड़ा हिस्सा उस पैसे का है जो बच्चों के नाम पर लाया जाता है। हमने बच्चों के नाम पर एनजीओ चलाने वाले फॉर्मर आईएएस ऑफिसर के एनजीओज को जब इंस्पेक्शन किया, हर्ष मंदर उनका नाम था। He was running 54 orphanages across the country, और जितनी अर्बन सेटिंग्स थे देश में बड़े, वहाँ उनके ऑर्फनेजेस थे। उनके ऑर्फनेजेस में बच्चों को रखा गया था और बच्चों को लिटरली सिखाया जा रहा था कि ये देश तुम्हारे खिलाफ है, ये सरकार तुम्हारे खिलाफ है।
We were witnessing the narratives being shared and things being manipulated, by foreign entities, and especially this place, Udaipur, is home to several NGOs, and I mean this is seen as an NGO capital. Until now, what was happening here, who were working here, what kind of agenda they were peddling, no one cared about that. But definitely, I mean, these things are coming to the fore, and we are getting more and more aware about these things. So it's really great. Thank you so much for the wonderful speech.